The night shift at Earth's deep space listening post was usually quiet. Most operators spent their time checking routine signals from human colonies and trading vessels. But tonight was different. Tom Wilson had been working at the station for 15 years, and he had never seen anything like the signal that now flashed on his screen. "Sir, you need to see this," Tom called out to his supervisor, Mike Brown, who was doing his usual midnight rounds. The signal was coming from a region of space that humanity had never contacted before. It was strong, clear, and definitely artificial. Mike rushed over, his coffee cup forgotten on a nearby desk. He leaned over Tom's shoulder, watching as the computer tried to decode the strange patterns. "Is it some kind of error?" he asked. But deep down, he already knew it wasn't. The signal repeated itself every 30 seconds, growing stronger with each pulse. As the computer worked to translate the message, both men stood in silence, knowing they might be witnessing history. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the translation appeared on their screen. "Help. Catastrophic stellar event. Evacuation needed. Builder civilization. Coordinates attached." The message went on to explain that their star was becoming unstable, threatening to go supernova much sooner than they had predicted. The Builders, as they called themselves, were an advanced civilization capable of creating massive structures in space, but now they faced extinction. Within hours, the listening post was swarming with officials from the United Earth Space Command. Captain James Miller arrived first, still adjusting his uniform as he walked through the door. He had been woken up in the middle of the night and flown directly to the station. "Play it again," he ordered, and Tom replayed the message. The captain's face grew more serious with each word. The Builders had already asked the Galactic Council for help, but every advanced civilization had refused, claiming the mission was too dangerous. "Sir," Tom spoke up, "there's more to the message." They included technical data about their star's condition. He pulled up the charts on the main screen. Even with humanity's limited understanding of stellar physics, it was clear the situation was dire. The Builders' home system was located in a region of space plagued by quantum storms, invisible disturbances that could disable any advanced technology. This was why the other civilizations had refused to help. Their ships, dependent on AI and complex computers, would be useless there. Captain Miller stood at the window, looking out at the night sky. Earth's ships were considered primitive by galactic standards. They still used manual controls and backup systems that other races had abandoned centuries ago. What the advanced civilization saw as backwards might be exactly what was needed. He picked up the secure communication device from his belt. "Get me the World Council," he ordered. "Emergency meeting protocol." As he waited for the connection, he turned to the staff in the room. "What we do in the next few hours might change everything. Not just for us, but for an entire civilization." The World Council connected quickly, a rare occurrence that showed how seriously they took the situation. Representatives from every major nation appeared on the main screen, many looking like they too had been woken up in the middle of the night. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Miller began, "1 hour ago, we received a distress call from an advanced alien civilization. They're facing extinction, and they need our help. Every other race has refused to assist them. We might be their last hope." He explained the situation, showing the data about the unstable star and the quantum storms. Some council members looked skeptical, others worried. But as Miller continued to speak, something else appeared in their eyes. Determination. "Yes, this mission would be dangerous," he acknowledged. "Yes, we might fail. But throughout human history, we've never turned our backs on those who needed help, no matter the risk. We've faced storms, climbed mountains, crossed oceans, and ventured into space because it was the right thing to do. This is no different." The council chamber fell silent. The decision they would make in the next few minutes would either mark humanity's first step onto the galactic stage or show that they were not ready for it. The fate of an entire civilization. The World Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as Captain Miller finished his presentation. The giant screens behind him showed the builders' star system, their failing sun painted in angry reds and yellows. He had spent the last hour explaining every detail of the rescue mission he proposed. Our older ships, the ones with manual controls, might be our greatest advantage, he said, pointing to the diagrams of Earth's rescue fleet. While other races depend completely on AI and quantum computers, we still train our pilots to fly without them. An older council member from India stood up. Captain, you're suggesting we send our best ships and crews into what could be a death trap. What if we lose them all? Miller nodded, understanding the concern. Ma'am, every great achievement in human history came with risks. When sailors first crossed the oceans, when climbers scaled Mount Everest, when we first went to Mars, people said it couldn't be done. But we did it anyway. The room fell silent as the main screen switched to show the builders' message again. Their plea for help, translated into every human language, scrolled across the display. It was impossible to ignore the desperation in their words. We have 3 weeks before the first solar flares make rescue impossible, Miller continued. We can get there in 2 weeks if we leave tomorrow. That gives us 7 days to save as many of them as we can. The Chinese representative leaned forward. And what do we get from this? The builders are advanced. They must have technology, knowledge they could share. Miller shook his head. With respect, sir, that's not why we should do this. We should help because we can. Because if our positions were reversed, we would hope someone would do the same for us. In the back of the room, Engineer Kate Roberts stood up. She wasn't supposed to speak, but she couldn't stay quiet. Council members, I studied the builders' technical data. They're incredible engineers. They build structures in space that we can barely imagine. But right now, all that advanced technology is useless to them. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. The council president raised her hand for silence. We will vote now. Remember, this isn't just about saving the builders. This is about who we are as a species. Are we ready to step onto the galactic stage? Are we willing to help others even when more advanced civilizations have turned their backs? The voting took less than 5 minutes. The result appeared on the main screen. 85% in favor. Earth would send its rescue mission. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. At spaceports around the world, crews rushed to prepare their ships. The flagship Hope, under Captain Miller's command, would lead the fleet. 5 other vessels, chosen for their reliable manual systems and experienced crews, would follow. Engineer Kate worked with her team to modify the ship's hulls, adding extra shielding against the quantum storms. In the simulator room, pilots practiced flying without computer assistance, relying only on their instruments and training. Tom Banks, the lead navigator, spent hours studying old sea charts. Space storms aren't so different from ocean storms, he told his crew. Our ancestors survived those with just a compass and the stars. We can do this. In orbit, the ships gathered one by one. They weren't the sleek, advanced vessels of other galactic civilizations. Earth's ships were sturdy, built to withstand the harsh realities of space travel. They carried extra backup systems, manual controls, and crews trained to handle any emergency. Captain Miller stood on the bridge of the Hope, watching the last supplies being loaded. Next to him, Engineer Kate checked the final modifications on her tablet. The rescue fleet would carry enough supplies to help transport thousands of builders to safety. All ships report ready, Captain, the communication officer announced. Miller looked at his crew, saw the determination in their eyes. They all knew the risks, but they also knew what was at stake. Humanity's first real test as a spacefaring civilization wasn't about showing their power or technology. It was about showing their heart. Send the message to all ships, Miller ordered. We launch in 10 minutes. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity stands for. As the countdown began, 6 ships powered up their engines. On Earth, billions watched through live feeds as humanity prepared to attempt what no other civilization dared: the rescue The first signs of the quantum storms appeared 7 days into their journey. The Hope's advanced sensors started showing strange readings, then stopped working completely. Across the rescue fleet, computer systems began to fail one by one. Just like we practiced, Captain Miller called out as his crew switched to manual controls. On the bridge, screens flickered and died, replaced by old-style analog gauges and mechanical displays. The ship's hum changed as backup systems took over. Engineer Kate moved between stations, checking the emergency systems she had helped install. "The quantum shielding is holding," she reported. "We're getting some interference, but the basic electronics are still working." Through the main viewport, space itself seemed to shimmer like heat waves over hot pavement. The other 5 ships maintained their formation, visible only by their running lights. Their communication systems, stripped down to basic radio, crackled with static but held. "This is why the other races wouldn't come," Tom Banks said from his navigation station. He worked with paper charts spread out beside his compass and basic instruments. Their ships would be dead in the water here. "But we're still going." A sudden jolt rocked the fleet. Warning bells rang across all ships as they entered a particularly strong storm. The crew braced themselves, hands steady on their controls. Captain Miller watched as his people handled the crisis exactly as they had trained. "Report from the engine room," Kate called out. "The manual coolant systems are working. We can maintain this speed." She paused, checking another gauge. "But the radiation levels are rising. We need to adjust our course." Tom Banks bent over his charts, making quick calculations with a pencil and ruler. "There's a gap in the storm pattern," he said. "If we turn 10 degrees to port, we might find calmer space." Miller gave the order, and the fleet turned together. They had practiced this maneuver dozens of times in simulators. Now, with their lives depending on it, the crews performed perfectly. Through the storms, 6 ships moved as one. Hours turned into days as they pushed deeper into the disturbed region. The crew worked in shifts, always keeping manual watches. They couldn't rely on automatic warnings anymore. Every step forward had to be earned through human skill and determination. In the ship's mess hall, during a short break, Kate shared her observations with Miller. "The quantum storms are getting stronger," she said, "but they're also showing patterns, like weather systems back on Earth." Miller nodded. Tom noticed the same thing. He says it reminds him of sailing through typhoons in the Pacific. The patterns are different, but the principles are the same. A young crew member approached their table, holding a manual radiation counter. "Engineer Roberts, Captain, you need to see this. The readings are changing." The device's needle swung back and forth wildly. They rushed back to the bridge. Through the viewport, they could see it, the first glimpse of the Builder's star. Even at this distance, it looked angry, swollen, and red, throwing off massive solar flares. "Message from the fleet," the radio operator called out. "All ships reporting increased radiation. The backup systems are handling it, but barely." Miller looked at his crew, saw the tiredness in their faces. They had been operating on manual controls for days, making constant adjustments, fighting against conditions that would have stopped any other rescue mission. But not one person suggested turning back. "We're detecting something ahead," Tom announced. "Large structures, matching the Builder's descriptions. We're getting close to their system." The fleet pushed forward, fighting through another storm front. The ship's hulls creaked under the strain, but the extra reinforcement held. Mechanical systems, simple but reliable, kept them moving forward when every advanced system had failed. "Send a message to all ships," Miller ordered. "We're about to make first contact. Remember your training. Remember why we're here." Through the quantum storms and past the warning signs that had turned away every other civilization, humanity's rescue fleet approached their destination. They had come farther than any Earth ships before, not because they were the most advanced, but because they refused to give up. Ahead of them, barely visible through the stellar disturbance, the first of the Builder's massive space stations came into view. The real test of The massive space station loomed before them, a structure so vast it made Earth's largest satellites look like toys. But something was wrong. The station was dark, with only a few emergency lights blinking across its surface. Through the viewport, they could see similar structures in the distance, all equally silent. No power readings, Kate reported, checking her basic sensors. Their advanced systems must be completely shut down by the quantum storms. She paused, adjusting a dial. But I'm picking up life signs. They're still in there. Captain Miller stood at the front of the bridge, studying the station through old-fashioned binoculars. Look there, he pointed. That has to be a docking port. Tom, can you get us close? The Hope moved forward slowly, its sister ships holding position behind them. As they approached, a weak signal cut through the static on their radio. The translation computer, running on minimal power, struggled to decode it. Earth vessels, thank you for coming. Most systems failed, running on emergency power. Miller grabbed the radio handset. This is Captain James Miller of the Earth ship Hope. We're here to help. How can we dock safely? The answer came back in broken phrases. The builders explained that their automated docking systems were offline. They would have to attempt a manual docking, something their civilization hadn't done in generations. We can do that, Tom said from his station, just like practicing in the simulator. His hands moved steadily over the manual controls, guiding the Hope toward the massive structure. Through the viewport, they got their first look at the builders themselves. Tall, graceful beings moved behind the station's windows, their bodies giving off a faint bioluminescence that lit their way through the darkened corridors. They watched the human ship approach with what looked like a mixture of hope and anxiety. The docking took 30 tense minutes. Without computers to assist, Tom had to judge every movement by eye, using only basic thrust controls. The clang of metal on metal echoed through the ship as they made contact. Emergency seals engaged, simple, mechanical systems that didn't need power to work. Kate led the first team across to the station. They carried portable lights and basic tools, knowing that anything more complex would fail in the quantum storm. The builders met them at the airlock. 3 of them, standing nearly 8 feet tall, their skin shimmering with patterns of light that seemed to change with their emotions. The builders tried to communicate using their advanced translation devices, but the devices failed instantly in the storm. Instead, they resorted to gestures and simple drawings. Kate and her team quickly learned that the builders' entire civilization was built on advanced technology. Without it, they were struggling to survive. They're not helpless, Kate reported back to Miller. They're brilliant engineers. They just never thought they'd need to work without their AI and quantum systems. Everything they built assumed those systems would always work. Working together, humans and builders began to find solutions. The builders learned to use manual tools, while the humans helped set up simple mechanical systems for essential functions. The builders' light patterns shifted to brighter colors as they began to understand that rescue was possible. More teams from the Earth fleet moved through the station, marking evacuation routes with glow strips and setting up relay points for their simple radio systems. The builders showed them maps of their civilization, dozens of stations, habitat rings, and research facilities, all going dark as the quantum storms intensified. In the station's main control room, Miller met with the builders' leaders. Through careful gestures and simple drawings, they explained their situation. Their son's deterioration was accelerating. They had even less time than originally thought. The builders had ships, huge, advanced vessels that could carry thousands. But like everything else they built, the ships depended on AI and quantum computers. They were useless in the storms. The Earth ships, small but sturdy, were their only hope. Miller looked out the control room window at his fleet of 6 ships. They would need to ferry people out in groups, making multiple trips through increasingly dangerous conditions. The crews would have to push themselves and their ships to the absolute limit. He turned back to the builder leaders and nodded firmly. The universal gesture of determination needed no translation. Humanity had not come this far to give up now. Engineer Kate stood in the massive engineering bay of the builder's station, surrounded by their sleeping ships. These vessels were beautiful, like silver birds frozen in flight, but without their quantum computers, they were just elegant sculptures. The builder engineer beside her, whom she had started calling Blue because of his colored light patterns, helped her measure the ships with simple tools. "The towing cables might work," she said, sketching on a paper notepad. Blue watched intently, his skin flickering with interested patterns. They had discovered that while the builders couldn't use their advanced technology, they learned incredibly fast. Within hours of being shown how to use manual tools, they were already suggesting improvements. On the bridge of the Hope, Captain Miller and Tom worked with other builder leaders, plotting evacuation routes on paper charts. They had marked the positions of all major builder stations and settlements, calculating distances and fuel requirements for each rescue trip. "We can fit about 50 builders on each Earth ship," Miller explained using hand gestures and drawings. "If we make continuous runs, moving in relay patterns." He drew lines connecting different points on the chart. The builder leader, whose light patterns glowed in steady purple waves, nodded in understanding. The plan they developed was both simple and incredibly dangerous. The Earth ships would each tow one builder vessel, using mechanical cables and old-style docking clamps. The builder ships, though powerless, could serve as lifeboats, holding hundreds of refugees. They would need to make at least 10 trips to save everyone. Kate's team worked through the night, reinforcing the towing cables with extra layers of steel and installing manual release mechanisms. They couldn't risk any complicated electronic systems. Everything had to work on basic physics and human control. "The first run will be the easiest," Tom explained to his navigation team. "But each time we go back, the star will be more unstable. The quantum storms will get worse." He spread out the sensor readings they had collected. "By the last run, we'll be flying almost blind." In the station's observation dome, Miller watched the sun through specially darkened windows. The massive red star threw off huge prominences, each one larger than the last. The builder scientists had shown him their predictions. They had only days before the first major solar flares would make rescue impossible. The loading began immediately. The builders organized themselves with impressive efficiency, once they understood they couldn't rely on their usual automated systems. They formed lines, passed supplies hand to hand, and helped each other into the Earth ships and their own unpowered vessels. "Ready for first launch," Kate reported from the engine room. She had modified the Hope's engines to handle the extra strain of towing. "The manual cooling systems are working better than expected. The builders helped us improve them." The first departure was the hardest. The Earth ships, each pulling a massive builder vessel, had to coordinate their movements using only radio and visual signals. The crews relied on skills that went back to the age of sailing, reading each other's movements, anticipating reactions, working as one. As they pulled away from the station, Miller watched the builder passengers on his ship. They crowded around the windows, their light patterns dimmed to soft blues and greens of worry as they watched their homes disappear behind them. But there was also hope in those patterns, growing stronger as the Earth ships proved they could handle their precious cargo. "First leg of the journey plotted," Tom called out. "We'll swing around the worst of the storm fronts. It'll take longer, but it's safer." He worked his calculations on paper, the way sailors had done for centuries before computers existed. The rescue fleet moved through space like a strange parade. 6 small Earth ships towing 6 massive builder vessels. They had to move slowly, carefully, fighting against the quantum storms that tried to tear them apart. But they moved together, human and builder crews working in harmony. Behind them, the angry red star flared again, as if warning them to hurry. This was just the first trip of many they would need to make. With each journey back, the danger would increase. But watching how smoothly human and builder crews worked together, adapting and learning from each other, Miller felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this was why humanity had kept their primitive ways alongside their advanced technology. Perhaps they had been preparing for this moment without knowing it. Now, in the depths of space, the Hope shuddered as another solar flare washed over the fleet. This was their 9th trip back to the builder stations, and conditions had gotten worse with each return. The angry red star now dominated the view, throwing off massive streams of burning plasma that lit up space like an endless lightning storm. Hull temperature rising, Kate called from her station. She worked quickly at the manual controls, adjusting coolant flow. The improvements they had made with the builders' help were being pushed to their limits. We can't take much more of this. Tom's hands never left the navigation controls as he guided the ship through the quantum storms. Paper charts covered his console, some edges singed from the heat that seeped through the ship's shields. 2 more degrees port, he called out. Everyone follow my lead. Behind the Hope, 5 Earth ships struggled to maintain formation. Each pulled a builder vessel loaded with refugees. This deep in the danger zone, they could only navigate by sight and basic radio signals. The quantum storms had grown so intense that even their backup electronic systems flickered and died. Message from the builder station. The radio operator shouted over the noise of straining engines. They say the star. It's happening faster than they predicted. We have less than 6 hours before total collapse. Miller looked at the status board where they kept track of the evacuation. They had saved thousands, but there were still hundreds of builders left on the last station. The final outpost, closest to the dying star, had been left until the end because of its dangerous position. How many more can we save? He asked Kate. The engineer didn't need to check her instruments. She had been calculating constantly, trying to find ways to push their ships just a little harder. If we drop all non-essential systems, run the engines hot. She paused, making quick calculations on a scrap of paper. We might manage 1 more trip, but we'd be cutting it very close. The radio crackled again. The last builder station was sending images. Through the static, Miller could see families huddled together, their light patterns dim with fear. Children clung to their parents, all of them waiting to know if help would reach them in time. All ships, sound off. Miller called over the radio. I won't order anyone to make this last run. It's volunteer only. He waited, expecting hesitation. Instead, 5 voices came back immediately, each captain volunteering their ship and crew for one final mission. They couldn't waste time returning to safe space. As soon as they dropped off their current passengers, the Earth fleet turned back toward danger. They left their builder vessels in a stable orbit and pushed their engines to maximum, racing against the star's death throes. The return journey was like flying through hell itself. Solar flares lashed out of the ships like fiery whips. The quantum storms grew so intense that the space between stars looked like boiling water. The crews worked in rotating shifts of 10 minutes, that being all anyone could handle at the manual controls before exhaustion set in. Port engine overheating, Kate reported, her voice steady despite the danger. She had rigged a manual pump system, and crew members took turns working it to keep the engines from melting down. But we're managing it. We can make it. The final builder station appeared ahead of them, a dark shape against the red giant star. Its outer sections were already beginning to melt from the intense heat. As they approached, they could see the builders had gathered everyone near the docking ports, ready for immediate evacuation. New reading from the star, Tom called out suddenly. His basic instruments, hardened against the quantum storms, showed a massive energy spike building. We have minutes, not hours. It's going to blow. Miller grabbed the radio. All ships, emergency docking procedures. Forget the safety checks. Get in, get our people, and get out. He looked at his crew, saw the determination in their eyes. We didn't come this far to fail now. The Hope led the way in, its hull glowing red from the heat. Behind them, the star pulsed like a living thing, preparing for its final devastating explosion. Everything they had learned, every skill they had practiced, would be tested in the next few minutes. 3 months after the rescue mission, the observation deck of humanity's first deep space station was filled with both humans and builders. Their gathering marked the official opening of the joint Earth Builder Space Academy. Through the large windows, Earth shone blue and peaceful, while the builders' new home star glowed softly in the distance. Captain Miller stood at the podium, his uniform still showing signs of damage from their final escape. None of the crews had wanted their uniforms replaced. The scorch marks and tears were badges of honor now. He looked out at the mixed crowd, remembering how close they had come to failure. That last rescue had pushed them beyond anything they thought possible. The ships had been seconds away from destruction when they made their jump to safety, the star's explosion chasing them through space. They had saved everyone from that final station, every single builder, down to the smallest child. When we first received the builder's distress call, Miller began his speech. Many thought we were crazy to even try. Our ships were too small, our technology too simple, our methods too primitive. He paused, smiling. We proved them wrong. In the front row, Engineer Kate sat next to Blue, who now served as the lead builder instructor at the academy. His light patterns showed the deep blue of pride and friendship. Together, they had already started teaching the next generation of space travelers something unique, how to combine the best of both their worlds. Our success wasn't about having the most advanced ships, Miller continued. It was about remembering our roots while reaching for the stars, about keeping the old skills alive alongside the new ones, about being willing to help, even when everyone else said it was impossible. The builders had kept their promise to share their knowledge. Already, the first joint human-builder engineering projects were underway. Massive space stations were being built, designed to work with both advanced quantum systems and simple manual backups. Every new ship now carried the best of both civilizations' technology. Tom Banks, who had navigated them through the worst of the quantum storms, now ran the Academy's navigation school. His first class was filled with both humans and builders, learning to use everything from star charts to quantum computers. The builders had discovered a deep respect for these older methods that had helped save their people. But the greatest change had come from the rest of the galaxy. News of humanity's successful rescue had spread quickly. Other civilizations, who had once looked down on Earth's primitive technology, now sent observers to learn. The Galactic Council had been forced to reconsider many of their assumptions. Today, we open this academy not just to teach spaceflight, Miller said, but to remind ourselves and future generations of an important truth. True advancement isn't about abandoning the old ways for the new. It's about learning from our past while building our future. As if to emphasize his words, a new ship passed by the station's windows. It was massive, combining builder engineering with human practical design. Its quantum engines were complemented by manual backup systems. Its AI computers worked alongside mechanical controls. It represented everything both civilizations had learned from each other. In the crowd, the rescued builder children played with human kids, teaching each other their games and stories. Their light patterns mixed with human laughter, creating a harmony nobody had thought possible just a few months ago. These children would grow up knowing both worlds, understanding both ways of thinking. The builders had given humanity the stars, sharing the secrets of their advanced technology. But humanity had given the builders something equally valuable, a reminder that sometimes the old ways were worth keeping, that true wisdom meant balancing progress with tradition. We came to save the builders, Miller concluded, but in doing so, we found something more. We found that the greatest strength lies not in technology alone, but in the heart and spirit of those who use it. In the willingness to help others, to face impossible odds, to never give up. He looked out at the gathered crowd, at the faces of those who had been part of that incredible rescue, and those who would carry its lessons forward. Together, we will build a future that remembers its past. Together, we will reach for the stars, not just with our machines, but with our courage, our determination, and our humanity. Outside the station, Earth continued its eternal dance around the sun, while in the depths of space, human and builder ships sailed together, carrying